Full disclosure, despite what you may think, I do not in any way hate the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. In fact, I'd consider myself a general fan of the trilogy. Well, at least the last two, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. I'm pretty sure nobody liked Batman Begins. Actually, upon closer investigation, most people seem to dislike The Dark Knight Rises as well. And yet, despite the general populace not caring for 2/3 of the franchise, the second movie, The Dark Knight, is considered so flawless and masterful that it single-handedly carries and excuses the other two films. Why is that? And why do I feel like these movies hurt Batman as a character? I'd like to explore that here, and probably other stuff too, as I have a bad habit of rambling. It's time for me to go deep.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Earlier I posed the question of why, if most people apparently dislike the bulk of the movies, those same people are so quick to come to the unneeded defense of them, Christopher Nolan, and Christian Bale's Batman. Now bear in mind this is all theoretical, but not to toot my own dick or anything, but I'm pretty good at this stuff. My theory is this, and I'd say it's a solid one. It's a combination of 5 factors. Factor 1. Batman has been a fan-favorite household name superhero almost immediately since his introduction in 1939, and despite numerous changes in costume, sidekick, and tone, his popularity has not waned once. Factor 2. These movies came out at a time where a superhero blockbuster was just coming to fruition. The MCU had just gotten started, and smaller things like the DCEU didn't even exist yet. Factor 3. The last Batman film we had was the massive comical failure of Joel Schumacher's 1997 circus titled Batman and Robin, with George Clooney taking on the titular role of Batman, but now including the infamous bat nipples, and also lots
Allow me to break the ice.
and lots
Revenge is a dish best served cold.
of ice puns.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Factor 4. Moviegoers seem to be incapable of separating things like objectivity and subjectivity, let alone a good movie from a good portrayal of a character. And finally, the first factor I'd like to focus on, Factor 5. The sudden and untimely death of superstar Heath Ledger. When Ledger was cast in the role of the Joker for the highly anticipated sequel to Batman Begins, to say the news didn't go well would be quite the understatement. People were fucking pissed. Countless threads on websites, countless comments, even petitions were made to express displeasure and hopelessness towards Ledger in the role. And, to be fair, the skepticism was generally warranted. Prior to this, Heath Ledger was known for mainly 2 movies, 10 Things I Hate About You and Brokeback Mountain, the latter mainly considered a joke to the anal retentive and sexually inept society of 2005. And people like me, who were in 5th grade at the time and considered the whole concept of a gay cowboy movie to be the most hilarious thing since
These nuts.
And even if both movies would come to be considered some of the best of their time, Heath couldn't shake that pretty boy image people attached to him because of them. And because of that, the idea that this Prince Charming Oscar darling was poised to play one of the most needlessly popular and quizzically influential villains of all time was way too big of a leap for many people, dudes, to take. But everything changed when he tragically died 6 months before the film's release. The spotlight began to shine even harder on Nolan and his crew, and by the time it came out on July 19th, 2008, people lost their fucking minds.
As the clock ticked down to midnight, ticket takers carefully let the eager audience in,
Wait a minute.
while hundreds of others waited on the street for the next showing.
We've been planning to see this for several months now, and then it turned out that it's going to be on his birthday, so we had to come out here.
The line stretched around 3 sides of this New York City block, but for these serious fans who bought their tickets weeks ago, a few hours on the pavement did not dull their enthusiasm.
The movie, and specifically Heath Ledger, were hits. It was already a big deal when it was in production, and the movie was already good. But when he died and delivered his best and final performance, he, the Joker, and the franchise became cultural phenomena. Heath Ledger from then on single-handedly defined not only the Joker, but everything that the Joker touched as well. All of a sudden, Christian Bale became the Batman to end all Batmen, Christopher Nolan became the most influential Batman handler of all time. And of course, Heath Ledger spawned endless memes, iterations, parodies, cosplays, and cringeworthy, unshowered white men doing imitations of his speeches from the movie in some odd attempt to impress people? But mostly just make everyone, me, absurdly uncomfortable.
Okay, all at once, all at once.
That's a riot!
Seriously, I can't even hear, "Do you want to know how I got these scars?" without my gag reflex being activated. It's just... I have PTSD. But here's the thing. Here's the big piece of evidence that nobody thinks about that changes everything, and I feel really pushes my case. The Dark Knight was not Heath Ledger's final movie. Heath Ledger died in January of 2008, in the middle of editing for The Dark Knight, but in the middle of filming the long-forgotten and verbose 2009 fantasy film, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. You may be asking yourself how those two correlate, how forgetting about a mediocre movie and exclusively remembering a good movie makes arguments for the latter less justified. I present to you a phrase that you may have heard tossed around the internet non-contextually in the past, specifically in reference to a notorious family of stained bears, the Mandela effect. Basically, the definition boils down to something like this. It's a phenomenon in which a big number of people share false memories of past events. Things like Kit Kats having a dash in the middle or Febreze being spelled with 2 E's instead of 1. And also, something like The Dark Knight not only being Heath Ledger's magnum opus, but his final role as well. The fact that so many people unequivocally believe this, despite widely available evidence to disprove it, shows just how willing these people are to justify false information. In my opinion, this puts their entire argument on shaky ground. The argument that this is a perfect iteration of the Joker, when Mark Hamill has been doing a better job for over a decade. The argument that this was the best portrayal of a Batman villain in general, when right next to the Joker in the same movie, Aaron Eckhart is constantly slept on for absolutely nailing the role of my personal favorite villain, Two-Face. And finally, the argument that, by extension from Heath Ledger, Christian Bale is the best and definitive Batman actor, when Michael freaking Keaton did a much better and more faithful job in an era where superheroes were still considered weird and niche.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
This all stems from the societal fog that was cast over moviegoers following Heath Ledger's death, in culmination with the other factors that I listed before. False memories and societal glorification has made this single movie so untouchable that even a vague criticism of it is taken as blasphemy, and that's just wrong. But what if none of that's right? What if that's all just baseless speculation? What if it's a stretch to associate the mourning of a beloved actor, ignoring of a not-so-good movie, and acknowledgement of a regularly competent director making regularly good movies, with those same movies being objectively piss-poor representations of an iconic fictional character? Fine. Let's talk facts. Let's talk facts in regards to Batman. I ask you this, viewers. Who is Batman? What makes Batman Batman? I briefly mentioned earlier how many changes he's gone through since his initial introduction. Over the years, we've had a ton of different versions of Batman, both Bruce Wayne and otherwise. But let's focus on the different versions of Bruce Wayne we've seen. Adam West championed Batman's campy side in the 1960s, and his version was briefly and beautifully revitalized in 2008 with the animated series Batman the Brave and the Bold. We've also seen different levels of gritty Batman, namely the version featured in iconic Frank Miller miniseries and film of the same name, The Dark Knight Returns, which, if you haven't read, I heavily recommend. But besides those main two, we've also seen different levels of both, with some amazingly managing to balance both humor and grit with impressive skill. But despite these changes, what always remains with Bruce Wayne? Number 1, his intelligence. Have you ever tried to argue with a Bat fan over who would win in a fight between him and, well, anybody? Their arguments tend to be something along the lines of, Batman has a plan to defeat anyone, to justify him swiftly and easily defeating someone like Spider-Man who, let's be real, would absolutely decimate Bruce. Alright, don't even start, okay? The point is, if that's the only argument so many self-proclaimed nerds have in favor of Batman being able to defeat practically anybody, there has to be some sort of evidence to have led them to this more or less incorrect conclusion. Evidence that demonstrates Batman's very clear and powerful mind and strategic capabilities. Number 2. His detective skills. Being smart is being smart. Reed Richards is smart. Tony Stark is smart. And certainly those two alone could do math in circles around Batman.
Fuck you, science!
But what Bruce has on those boys are his frequently forgotten detective skills, something that was once a staple of his character but is now regularly forgotten by even the biggest of writers and fans. Batman isn't just a superhero. He solves crimes and mysteries. He dusts for prints, he hunts people and things down, he figures things out and reads between the lines. No matter if he has a can of anti-shark spray or just a fucking gun for some reason, Batman always has his ace in the hole, which is his deductive capabilities. Number 3. His fighting skills. What Batman lacks in superhuman abilities, he makes up in, like, suprahuman abilities. As in, not impossible, just highly improbable. Bruce Wayne is in top physical human condition. His endurance is off the charts. He can take more of a beating than the strongest person in the real world can even fathom, and still make it on time for brunch. He knows at least 80 different fighting styles, when normal people more or less only know how to punch, jump, and kick. And on top of all of that, he's a fucking acrobat. I mean, he's no Dick Grayson, but I'd like to see you jump from rooftop to rooftop without breaking every bone in your body on a nightly basis. Number 4. Finally, his gadgets. He always has his batarangs, but people always forget about the grappling hook, the sprays, the acids, the pills. You think he wears a big yellow belt for fun? Nah, son, this isn't Final Fantasy. Those buckles are practical. All that being said, let's explore how the seminal Baleman handles these essential Batman traits, shall we? Number 1. Intelligence. You know what, for the sake of time, let's just crunch 1 and 2 together and include his detective skills as well. When people imitate or parody the Dark Knight trilogy, what's a phrase you're likely to hear?
Where's Rachel? Where's Harvey Dent? Where's the trigger?
I'm not sure if you know this or not, but detectives generally don't get answers by asking. At least, not like that. I'm going to present to you a few clips from the Dark Knight movies. These clips are unedited and straight from the films. Let's see how Bruce Wayne, master detective, handles important questions in the Christopher Nolan universe.
Look at you go!
Does Harvey know about you and his little bunny?
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
Choose between one life or the other. Your friend, the district attorney, or his blushing bride to be. You have nothing to threaten me with. Nothing to do with all your strength.
Where's the trigger? Where is it? You never give it to an ordinary citizen. Where is it? Where's the trigger? Where is it? Where is it? Tell me where the trigger is. Then you have my permission to die.
Not super promising stuff. And it doesn't really get much better from there. As far as detective work, he does little to nothing and instead relies heavily on his associate, Lucius Fox, portrayed excellently by Morgan Freeman, to do most of the head work. In simpler terms, as far as these movies are concerned, Lucius is the brain and Bruce is the brawn. Though I use that term very lightly, and I'll touch more on that soon. Also, Alfred is just the butler, I guess. In regards to his intelligence, Baleman certainly isn't stupid. I rewatched Back to the Future recently, and I was simply floored with how regularly fucking idiotic Marty McFly acted. Is Marty canonically dumb? You can't make that many slip-ups about the future so regularly and not be dumb, right? Anyway, while Bruce never does anything to the level of how he is in the comics, he also never really does anything super unintelligent either. Baleman falls somewhere between competent and kind of witty, but that's really the extent of it. Next, number 3, his fighting skills. I'll just let these clips speak for themselves.
It was your father's. Anger does not change the fact that your father failed to act.
The man had a gun.
Would that stop you?
I've had training.
The training is nothing. The will is everything. The will to act. Yield. You haven't beaten me. You have sacrificed sure footing for a killing stroke.
Theatricality and deception. Powerful agents to the uninitiated. But we are initiated, aren't we, Bruce?
Members of the League of Shadows. And you betrayed us.
Yes, you were excommunicated by a gang of psychopaths.
I am the League of Shadows. I am here to fulfill Ra's al Ghul's destiny.
From the beginning to the end of practically all three of these movies, Bruce fucking Wayne gets his ass handed to him on a silver platter with a side of champagne in 0 seconds flat. His battles almost play out like an arc in DBZ. Batman is weak. Batman gets strong. Batman completes mild acts of strength. Batman gets fucking destroyed. Batman gets stronger. Batman beats the bad guy who should still probably be much stronger than him, but whatever. And the movies more or less follow this pretty formulaically. Now, this isn't to say that comic Batman is unbeatable. Obviously, I already argued against why the mere concept is fucking stupid. But as far as hand-to-hand combat goes, he's one of the top fighters in DC, and maybe even comics as a whole. In the Nolan trilogy, as Batman, he spends more time eating dirt than eating ass. Wait, eating pavement than kicking pavement versus kick. He loses a lot. Very fucking frequently. And that's just not Batman. Moving on to the final bat point. Number 4, his gadgets. Whomst? Does Bailman even use gadgets? Like, I think he threw a batarang once, maybe? Ah, yes. There it is. Great. Maybe a grappling hook, too? Okay, sweet. But you know, what about the rest of your belt? No, many cars do not count. Nolan's Batman relies mainly on his money and his connections, which is probably the most base of base definitions of Batman imaginable. I say this regularly. Christopher Nolan's Batman exists in the real world, where Bill Gates has a lot of free time after his retirement and decides to fight some crime. Nolan is more than competent in filmmaking, but he's an absolute dumpster fire at superheroes. Based on my observations as a longtime fan of comics and movies, I honestly feel like it's not too big of a stretch to suggest the idea that Nolan hasn't picked up a single Batman comic his entire professional life. It just doesn't add up. And yet die-hard Batman fans will swear up and down that these are the movies. This is Batman. Christian Bale is unbeatable. No Joker will ever top Ledger. No Batman film could ever live up to his legacy. Because of the points I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and the fact that these movies are, truthfully, very good dramas, not superhero movies, fans are planted in the notions that nothing could or ever will top these bat blessings we were given. And yet, they are fools. blinded by a cultural fishnet that has the average citizen too shaken to voice their own opinions. You don't like Harry Potter that much. You didn't understand Inception. You've never seen Fight Club. You actually enjoyed the Star Wars prequels. You find Uma Thurman weirdly attractive. And most of all, you refuse to admit that someone very quickly and easily took the crown as the best Batman we've ever had, much more faithful to the character and built for the role than Christian Bale ever could be. Ben Batfleck Affleck. For those of you still viewing, thanks for being cool. I'd like to present you with this, Batfleck, and why he is the best Batman the silver screen has ever gotten, and probably will ever get. I use the same bat points that I use with Baleman, plus one more that I think is kind of important. Number 1, his intelligence. In mainly 2 movies, Batman v Superman and Justice League, Batfleck has demonstrated incredible reasoning skills, despite some severe lapses in writing.
Find him! Save Martha!
As well as some oh-so-necessary plot armor, Batfleck has managed to smartly work around many issues posed to him when confronted with difficult decisions. Number 2, detective skills. Batfleck wins this round by default, considering the fact that even if due to some lapses in writing...
You don't understand. There's no time. I understand.
He reached the wrong conclusions. He did do a good bit of sleuthing in both movies he's appeared in. Bale did no detective work whatsoever during his entire run. In my book, trying and failing is better than not trying at all, especially in regards to doing things yourself, using the tools at hand versus beating random people to a pulp in order to reach your incorrect deductions. Number 3, his fighting skills. This is where Affleck really shines. Let's let these clips speak for themselves as well. Sure, he probably definitely killed more than a handful of guys in these movies, which Batman tends not to do. But the difference is that he actually kicked more ass in a single scene than Bale did in 3 movies. Actually, we can go ahead and cross gadgets off this list too, since, look at that, he's actually using his utility belt. Holy shit, imagine that! The extra point I was going to mention was just his physical appearance. Batman is now traditionally pictured as a big, stocky, intimidating, and handsome guy, give or take a cleft. As far as appearance goes, both in and out of the suit, Ben Affleck much better represents this vision of the character than the lean and slightly skeletal Christian Bale. Oh, a second extra point, the fucking voice.
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
I don't know. I never knew. Never. They went to some guy for a couple of days before they went to the dealer.
Why?
There was something else in the drugs. Something hidden.
What?
I never went to the drop-off point. It was in the Narrows. Cops only go there when they're in force.
Do I look like a cop?
Next time they shine your light in the sky, don't go to it. The bat is dead. Bury it. Consider this mercy.
Tell me.
so glad we're past that. I couldn't take much more. I'm not strong enough. Look, I get it. Really, I do. Firstly, I'll get off the table that there is a clear and evident bias against DC movies. They've been fought against since Man of Steel, and critics and Marvel stands have not let up an inch since then. Every Marvel movie, despite how mediocre it probably is, gets glowing reviews, or at the very least the arbitrary label of fun, which in reality doesn't really mean anything at all when you think about it. But besides Wonder Woman, which has succeeded by doing in 4 years what Marvel has skated by without doing for over a decade, every DC movie has been absolutely crucified. Don't get me wrong, some criticism is warranted, as it always is. BVS wasn't really good. It had a ton of issues stemming mostly from the piss-poor writing. Suicide Squad also really wasn't great. Jared Leto was an absolute nightmare on screen and off, apparently. The movie was racist. It had characters making very stupid decisions. The plot didn't really make much sense. Development was next to non-existent. A lot of potentially amazing scenes got cut. There were far too many reshoots. It reeked of desperation. The ending didn't really make much sense, etc. But what people won't say about those movies is that they were brutally entertaining. Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, and Will Smith championed their roles and forced beautiful dimensions out of a flat script. And Batman v Superman brought out some of the coolest scenes in all of comic book cinema, with a gorgeous reimagining of a scene we've witnessed a million times, an incredible opening sequence, and probably one of the best character introductions I'd seen since Spidey stole my heart in Civil War.
Hey everyone.
The bias against DC is real, and Marvel can slide by with their repetitive plot lines and forgettable villains and arbitrary labels of fun with no substance behind them, while just because DC also had their problems, and they started off with a darker tone than most are used to, they are the scum of the earth. That's bad enough. But people won't even admit it, and it's really pathetic. Why can't we just be stoked that we live in a time where being a nerd isn't a crime anymore? Why can't we be excited that there's multiple big-name superheroes, and even obscure ones, being brought to the public eye and adored? We've seen Batman and Superman fight. We've had 3 versions of Spider-Man. We've had a female-led superhero movie shatter box office records, and have a black-led superhero movie preparing to do the same early in 2018. And yet nerds always want to have shit be a competition. Why, though? Because this is the time we live in, and because people love a show. Here's mine. Ben Affleck fits the role of Batman better than Christian Bale ever did, and the quality of their movies in comparison to one another do not change that fact. It is more than fair to say that the Nolan movies are better, but it's equally true that Affleck is a better fit for the character. Bale does have Affleck on the role of Bruce Wayne though, but that's mainly due to the fact that we haven't gotten a chance to properly explore that side of Batfleck yet. And with the way things are going, we may never get the chance, and that really bums me out. The Dark Knight trilogy is bad for Batman because it closes the possibility for so many people to experience much bigger and better things. Because so few people can separate certain aspects of a movie from others, like quality of a film as a whole versus faithfulness to a character. Combined with the DC bias, on top of a strange hatred for Ben Affleck in general, many people are forgetting just what made them fall in love with Batman in the first place. But that's more or less what I have to say on the topic. Thank you so much for watching. This is very long, but if you stuck all the way through, let me know what you think in the comments. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe to see more content like this, as well as music videos, probably gameplay in the future, skits, songs, who knows. But that's all. See ya.
やりたいな気持ちいいなセックス気持ちいいな僕はセックス大好きいつもセックス毎日やりたいセックスチンコをマンコに入れたいな気持ちいいな入れたい
Please get in my ass.